Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting for April 12th. I don't know if Diane and Bill are joining us or not.
So Diane's coming in.
Okay, thank you. I'll just call the meeting to order. And remember, is there any late items today?
No late items to add.
Okay, thank you. We do have 7 items on the agenda, so I'd like to adopt the agenda. Oh, sorry.
I've been seeing a lot of emails going around. I'd like to take a look at proposing an alternate proposal to the funding of overruns for snow and removal and road repairs for 2017.
So you'd like to add that as a late item?
Yes.
Is there anywhere we will do that late item? Would that be D? Mr. Member, would that be D?
I'm not too sure. From a process, I'll look to the track. You have a recommendation from staff. You could kill that and have the mayor make his motion or anybody else make their motion.
So it would be already covered under D?
G. Yeah.
G?
That would be G financial plan update.
Okay. We can include that in that discussion.
So is it alternate proposal? Alternate, whatever suggest, whatever. Okay, so motion to adopt the agenda as amended. So moved by, I'm assuming his first names if everybody's okay with that. Bill, second by Jim. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Adoption of no presentation. So 6A, the tax exemption 3-year review update. Mr. Memo.
So the report in front of you is for information purposes. As background, we have a practice of policy that we review our property tax exemptions every 3 years. And this year was going to be the year we'll do this. And we are running into a staffing capacity issue. And the changes to the committees have impacted that work. So what we're proposing to do is we have received, as we outlined in the report, we have received applications and the review had started, and so it stopped midway. We can't finish that because the same staff that collect your taxes are the same staff who support the PTE process. So the solution for us is we would roll over the approvals that were there. We will deal with the new ones that have come in and would advise you and make recommendations, but won't do the full-scale review this year. We'll do that in 2018. And so that's what's in front of you.
Thank you. I have Gord and Bill Yoka.
Yeah, as you guys, it's not just an information thing anymore, and you're looking at rolling things over. I'm going to remove myself for perceived conflict because I work with a nonprofit that will be seeking a furniture report, but will also be seeking. It's not like when we just approved bylaws. So you're rolling everything over. So I just got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mema, just I'm just kids and my brain's just starting to get back to adult life at this moment. So what's our millions in PTE, you think, ballpark? How much do we, if we were going to collect taxes, to be clear, how much does this total do we give us permissive tax exemptions?
So I'll make a brief comment while staff look at that number. The issue of property tax exemption, we could look at it as we're losing revenue. We could look at it as a partnership with non-profits to provide services that the city could otherwise provide. So there's many ways of looking into that, but from a numbers perspective, I think the number is...
Through the chair, $1.4 million. Is the municipal taxes that are exempt.
No, I just wanted to remember I wasn't given a moral, those ethics on that. Just wanted to see a public number. Thank you. 1.4. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. how many, what's the number? I know we've had this before, but I just want to refresh my, how many existing people are applying for BTEs, and then what are the new ones that you're bringing to council for consideration, or staff are looking at consideration?
Through the chair to Councillor Hahn, there's approximately 75 organizations that receive permissive tax exemptions. That's not including churches. And about 124 folios total. So that would be the number of properties that receive the exemption.
And that's existing.
That's existing.
So
That's
what,
correct.
What are we looking at? What are we adding to this? Because that's correct. He says your staff are only looking at new applications, right?
The new applications would be coming forward for this committee to review and determine whether they want to be put on the ballot.
So how many? That's the number.
There's going to be approximately 4 or 5 that have come off, and I believe right now I have 3. That would be 3 new applications that will be coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. On page 5, so we're just. Sorry, didn't see you, Jim.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. This is where I sent forward once a thing about evaluation for social enterprise. Like, how does council select a multiplier for economic development, for example? How does council, do we ever set that multiplier? We hear from our dev groups or whoever that this is our multiplier. If a guy comes to county, spends this much, and that calculates up to this. And I asked a while ago, and never heard, I didn't make a motion or anything, but about, is there any community to do that? We say, if you can show me 1,500 hours of volunteer time, we say, as a council, we've selected this amount to meet that value, to show that you've done $100,000 worth of work that would cost us. And we could calculate it out then. You know, you can say it's a minimum wage. You could give a dollar value to it. So I don't know if there's anything what we can do. I'll look up more on that. But it's like council selecting multipliers for service to community, for NEPC development, for DNBI, anything we use. We created kind of be the norm somewhere built. There must be Ernst Young or somebody has that type of evaluation that we could establish, because our economies fluctuate up and down. We can establish how those services benefit our community. So I'll look more into that. I just want to bring it to the table as an idea and a concept. Thank you.
Cool. I just wanted to review just once again, just for clarification so everybody knows, with respect to the ICF and the permissive tax exemptions for ICF. When it was a private railway and people went across the railway and needed access to it, or put power lines or fiber optics or anything like that in the right of way, there was you were dealing with a private company. They could charge whatever they wanted. When it became a community or active island-owned entity, there was an understanding that there would be no charges for access to certain, there would be no use charges, if you will, to any of the member communities or First Nations. The only people that would pay would be private interests. So, for example, TELUS, Shaw, cables or anything like that through it, they will pay a lease fee. In turn, there was the expectation, and there was the promise by the regional districts that there would be no taxes charged to the ICF. So I'll give you an example. We asked the question, and a note was brought up in the core services review that the contractors had suggested that we look at the permissive tax exemptions for ICF without peeling back the layers of the onion to discover what the relationships were between the parties. So I'll give you an example of what happens when you don't grant a PTE to ICF. In the case of Langford, last year they chose not to grant a PTE of $13,500 in municipal taxes. The government, the province of British Columbia, says if you're not prepared to grant them an exemption, when you're an owner and a participant, then everything becomes due. So the tax bill was created with school, hospital, police, and all this other kind of stuff, came to a grand total of $48,000. So it was a bill sent from Langford to the ICF, $48,000. There's an agreement amongst a number of the regional districts that if they have what they call a rogue municipality that doesn't grant PTEs, that the regional district will pick up and subrogate the loss back to the municipality. So rather than go through that every year, it was just a determination, direct relationship between Langford and the island corridor would be that for the use of properties on the corridor, because Langford had not agreed to what the parties had agreed to, they would simply they would no longer provide those accesses for free. So a bill was sent to Langford for $50,000 to cover off the tax expense that was created by not granting the PTE. So it's complicated, but the net result is that if you don't provide PTEs to the ICF, the bill will be much higher, significantly higher. That's about 4 times higher. So if anybody wants any further detail on finance, they can certainly check with the staff at the ICF. They can explain it maybe better than I could.
Thank you. Jerry, thank you.
Thank you. Jim brings up a good point about added value and multipliers. I think that is something that we should really, really consider, because we do this already with our grants. Well, we're not forced to do it, but we get this information. When VI somebody comes up and tells us that what our 80 grant gets us is 10% of their funding, they leverage it and multiply it by 10 to give their 800,000 plus budget. That shows that we're getting value, and that's what they tell us, that we're getting value for $80,000 that we give them. When I see PTEs, we don't see anything. I would love churches. I have no problem giving tax exemptions to people with churches, and not that I don't do churches or anything, but you know, we're having this complaint about garbage. There's just garbage in the neighborhood. So why can't we put these people on notice, and next year we're looking at this, and one of the key factors that we're going to look at is a multiplier effect of what are your people contributing to the local community that we're going to benefit you to give you these tax breaks. They should, just because you're a church, if you're not a churchgoer, why are you getting a break for others because somebody decides to start a church? You can get a tax break with no other incentives or anything else that are not fair to others. And I feel that we do need a multiplier effect of some sort, that they're going to show value. You know, prime example, a great church is the one on Townsite that takes in the cold weather sometimes. That's amazing. It's great. That's value. We should see that. We should see what that's worth. Give us a number.
We paid them $45,000.
Yeah, on top. Yeah, but they get tax exemption for doing a service, and I think that it's great value. And especially if you get these organizations in their areas, you know, even if it's picking up garbage 3 times a year or whatever it is, they write down their community hours as a value of whatever we calculate. If we had to deal with our staff, $25 an hour or 30, whatever we pay, you know, you have 10 people up there, so many hours, that's value. We're getting that value, and that shows to our residents why we're giving these PTEs. And I think that's critical, because we always get criticized on why we're giving these tax funds away. And if we can justify this, I think it adds, you know, huge value. So I think that when we do, I don't know if I need this in the form of a motion. Yeah, but when we do look at this for the review for next year, if we're going to defer this, then I think we should put them on notice that this is going to be something that we're going to look at, so they can prepare when it does come up. So I just don't want to surprise them. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Victor, did you want, I have Jim Kippen and Bill Yocum. Did you want to?
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is you had a grants advisory committee that reviewed the applications, and within those applications there were statements of value, and so that work or that paperwork didn't come through to this table. So there may be I think an opportunity to enhance that, to make sure that at least that becomes part of the actual report that says we're giving you PTEs for $40,000 because you're doing X, Y, Z. So we can communicate that. But there is obviously an opportunity to improve on that process. and we can send it to them.
Thank you. I have Jim and then Bill and then Ian.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I don't use the word social credit. That's why I use social enterprise. I don't like the word social credit. That's a bad taste to me. But I just want to go back to the mayor's point on rogue members or rogue municipalities and ICF issue. I would call them a member not in good standing. So it's interesting. The ICF would name it rogue. It's a member not in good standing in the party group, and if you do something about that. So am I to understand that is a written bylaw in their operational system? You've been in there for a few years. Is that a typical written down policy that if a neighborhood or group organization within the regional district, which is a municipal government or local authority, if they do not give PTE, then they will be charged? Is that a written policy, or is that one of those unwritten policies that an organization sometimes uses? Or do you not have that answer and you will get it for me?
I am told that it forms part of some of the agreements with the regional districts.
So it's a written policy.
That's where I would take that.
Okay, I would take it that it isn't, because I've never heard that before. So thank you. I'm going to search that out. Be good. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill York and then
Like, yeah, just on the, just so I have my clarity, sometimes I ramble on and not know my facts, or I thought I knew my facts, and I was inaccurate. So just so I'm clear on the Island Corridor conversation, it's a good time. I had an exclusive conversation with Mary Young on this Saturday evening at an event, and I think we listened to this on the subject, but, so Bill, so I'm clear. If we didn't give the permits for tax exempt in our city region, ICF could bill us for anything to do with the line. So that's not clean, but that's simple. So
No, anything, right.
if there's more around the line,
That's right, that's right.
Let's say if we had to do a road crossing.
Well, we pay for those anyway.
So I'm confused. What could they bill us for? This is not you. I'm just looking for clarity.
Water line right-of-ways, sewer line right-of-ways, those sorts of things, electrical services.
So I heard electrical would be hydro. So that would be like, I heard Fortis and those, that's their own bill regardless. Hydro, Fortis, Shaw, Telus. So would we really have much interaction with them along the right of ways in our region? I'm not speaking elsewhere, just in our jurisdiction. If it would come into play even.
I can't honestly say what interaction we would have on the billing side. They manage 3,400 different right-of-way licenses.
So, okay, so my final comment would be sort of what Jim was saying, or not saying, but what I'm reading is, if it's not actual policy, which we don't know at this point, it's just ICF holding with hostage with threats. We're going to bill whatever we want because you're not playing game with us. That's how optically it looks to an offset to me, if it's not in policy. So, I don't know, Victor, how much for instance tax that we give ICF at this point anyways. But to me, with Councilor Story, I'm going to wrap this up here, Mr. Chair. So what Jerry is suggesting is, awesome, let's do this when people are giving us a service. Absolutely. But there's probably numerous numbers. Like ICF says one because it's glaring into the subject last night, and we all know we're passionate about it. So, what service do we get from them? Zero. For the last few years, zero. So why would we give a permissive tax exempt? Just for someone to hold us hostage to say, "Oh, if you're going to do this line here, we're going to bill you God knows what." So that's how it looks in the offset. So I just want to share those comments, Mr. Chair, and I may be a little bit offside, but that's how I'm looking at it from a simpleness. Thanks.
what I'm hearing is a value proposition. So what is the value proposition of any services provided by ICF? And what it costs us to cross through their property, essentially. I have Ian and then Diane.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to go back to Mr. Mendes' comment, and someone who has chaired the Grants Advisory Committee for the past several years. I know that committee has looked very, very carefully at each application as it's come through, and certainly whatever group receives a tax break from the city should be justifying that in terms of services provided to the citizens. And we're not, I want to make it clear that in my opinion, we have not been giving tax breaks for nothing. They've had to justify what they're doing. As far as a multiplier effect or some type of formula, that's an interesting concept, but I think it would be very hard to apply to the different variety of organizations that we're looking at. How do you compare Haven House to the SPCA, or I could name any of the 75. I think each one has to be looked at individually, and they have to be very careful filling out their application form to justify how many employees, how many volunteers, what services do they offer, what do they provide to the community. So I'm satisfied that that is being done. Certainly we can look at a more formalized process if council wishes. But to this point, what I'm saying is I think it has been a fairly stringent review of these applications. So I'm quite happy to accept Mr. Mim's recommendation as we move forward. Thanks.
Is there a meeting this month on grants?
No.
Okay, thank you. Diane.
Well, given the discussion about ICF, I move that we ask staff to prepare a report to us regarding the implications of our fiscal relationship with the ICF. Then we will have some answers and we won't be wondering or guessing.
Second the motion, if I can add that they contact the RDN staff for information, because the RDN staff is really up to date on ICF.
Whoever they need to contact to give us a complete report, then that's what they'll do, I'm sure.
So if I understand the motion, actually was good. You guys,
Yeah,
you guys catch that? So then there's a motion and it's been seconded by Diane, seconded by Jim, that direct staff to generate a report on ICF and its implications with the city in its operations or something. I'm not sure.
Fiscal relationship
Fiscal
between the ICF and the city.
That cleans it up. Certainly. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. If there's no more discussion on this subject matter, we do have a recommendation also on page 4, the 3-year review update report dated 2017-12 be received for information. Moved by Jim, second by Ian. Is there any discussion? I only have one question. What's permissive tax exempt? How long are you permissive tax exempt? Or is it a 3-year period before you come up for a review? Or is there any window of term?
To the chair, the review is scheduled for every 3 years, and so an exemption is granted until the next review is completed. So this review halted partway through, so we would look to either start the review again next year. So the properties that are currently exempt in 2017 will continue to be exempt in 2018 until the next review is completed.
Thank you. So if I understand them correctly, the 3 bullets on page 5. So we're receiving this for information. However, there's essentially 3 options available on its continuance. So we're receiving this for information. What is going forward next step? Review in 2018 or accept the core services review or some other direction?
So you have the options on page 5, but in summary what we're saying is, as I said at the beginning, is we bring forward, we roll over the ones that are in books, we review what's in the books for those that have dropped or their status has changed, so those that need to be removed from the list, we remove them. And then we bring the 3 to you, or 4 that are new for adjudication. And then in 2018, we go into our cycle again of a full review.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Just the last question then. So when we're doing our full cycle of 2018, these 3 new applications that we applied, they're not 3 years from this year. They're gonna all get looked at again in 2018, right? So when that 2018 comes, everybody gets looked at. There's no pushing them, this 3 years you're grandfathered into these exemptions.
Correct. So what staff we're contemplating was when we bring the 3, it will be for 1 year, so that
Yes.
everybody gets reviewed at the same time. We start this line.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, carried. We'll move on to 6B, which is the net operating results that we can get towards that. For year ending December 31st, trusting Mr. Mema that you will introduce this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report provides the information of our operating and capital results. Capital one is going to be the next report. This one deals with the operations for the year ending 31st December 2016. And we've provided you with an explanation of the variances on Appendix 1. And at this point, this is for information. Next week, you'll receive the audit report from KPMG and make your recommendation to Council as to how to deal with those financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you. First question, Dan.
On the question of just remove the recommendation that the operating results be received for information.
Thank you. Moved by Ann, second by Joe. Any discussion? Being none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We move down to 6C, the capital project, which is on page 15 to 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like the previous reports, this deals with our capital results ending December 31st, 2016, and we're providing this as information. We have also provided you with an appendix that deals with the list of the projects, as well as the funding sources and the stages of completion where these projects are at.
Thank you. Any questions on capital project results? Go ahead.
No, thank you. It was somewhat sort of sensitive in certain fraction areas of conversation. The boundary Northfield. And is that, and I haven't been asked, so I guess it's revocably, is that, it's still in the books, I see. Is there some real intent of going forward with that project?
So, as you noticed on page 18,
And my final, and I know there's some provincial money tied to this, I think, but I would correct. Sorry.
so the project is on hold, and I think from the public works, the recommendation is that they'll be coming back to council to seek direction. So that's where it is at this point.
So it's not dead.
It's not dead. It's in the books. We still have to come back to you to get direction on the project.
Okay. Have Jared and Joe.
Thank you. Just this question with on page 19 with Port Theater expansion. I thought when we had discussed this that we hadn't found 5.7 million. I thought that wasn't budgeted yet. Wasn't that what we were told, that it was going to be a tax issue that, we have it on the books, but it wasn't committed from anywhere? So does this mean it is committed as a capital project? Because how do you commit something, not have a fund for it? I think RCMP is one of the questions. I just still confused on the Port Theater. I think we all are always confused because it shows up every time. Just clarification on that one.
You're not alone.
Yeah, I know. Through the chair, the number of layers on this project, right? So you have made a commitment that you will assist the society in this expansion. You've made that commitment. They have made a commitment on their side on how they would raise the funding and stuff like that. So from a project perspective, this is a live project that is in the books. and we have simply identified the funding sources and the costs as they are known to date. Now, the second layer has to do with the impact on the city, and that's the property tax impact. So when you look at the project, and we talked about this last year, as of now, yes, we don't know when the port would walk through the door and say we're ready to go. We've made an assumption that by 2019, I think, that would happen. So from a property tax implication, there is no impact from this project in 2017, 18 until 19. So as information gets refined, as we go through the cycle in 2018, we'll ask the same question of the port, when do you think you will show up? So we are not taxing anyone yet. I would say though that in 2019, the property tax increase that you see there would include that amount. And so, but you're not taxing in 2019 to date. You will set that rate when you get to 2019. And so that's what this reflects.
Follow up here.
Thank you. So again, onto the 2019, when I look at our last page on page 41, we're at 0.9% tax. So theoretically, at $5.7 million, that's 5.7%. Or depends on, or where the funding comes from. But it doesn't show it because it's only showing a 0.9% increase plus the 1% that we've committed. So we're at 1%, and that includes the port theater.
Right. So the tax impact on the port theater side on your commitment is 0.3, if I remember correctly. So that 0.9 in 2019 includes that.
No.
2019 is actually 2.4, so you need to look at the shaded line.
No. Yes. 2.3. Because I'm still confused because we haven't gone. Isn't we have to commit $5.7 million what we committed?
No. Okay, let's step back there. I think that's really the issue. So do you guys want to speak on? Go ahead, yeah.
So basically, the total project is just under $12 million, with the city having made a commitment of 4.2 million, isn't it? 4.2 million. And at this point in time, in this financial plan, what we've used for that $4.2 million is borrowing. Therefore, the borrowing would start in 2019, and yes, it does have an impact on the projected property tax increase in 2019 of about 0.3%.
So
as we go forward in the next planning cycle, the timing of that may change, may be further delayed. We don't know. From the scope of the project may change. That's something that needs to be looked at.
Oh, thank you. So this is the first time I've ever told that we were going to be borrowing this money. No, I don't think we want to say that we're going to borrow our share.
So at first, if I remember correctly, and Deborah correctly, at first we thought we would use a grant, and then I think from this is the second time we say the best way for us to go with this is the borrowing side.
Okay, so now, because when I talked about stuff, when we talked about borrowing long term, I have no problem with it, but when I was pre-thinking of what projects that the city would be borrowing on, this wasn't one of them. So now we can add this to our list. Because I would like to see a list of potential borrowing from the next finance audit, whatever we have, because I like to know what we're going to borrow for. Because I did not think that this was going to be one of them. Not I don't mind borrowing. I just like to know what we plan on borrowing. Because if it's going to be borrowing, then this could come out of our capital reserve or council strategic reserve fund that we're building for. Because what else are we building? Because if this is not a project for that, I don't know what is. So,
I think basically what I'm hearing Jerry say is that if we had a capital project list and what would be coming from the DCCs or strategic infrastructure reserve funds or grants or borrowing to make up the amounts that are required to do the capital projects is what he's seeking.
So we'll certainly provide that. We try not to overwhelm you. We've provided that list before, but we'll send it again.
Thank you. Then I had Jim.
A quick back to Boundary Northfield. ICF has a huge impact on that intersection and the standards for the rail. And last night at the RDM, we discussed putting trails in the railway corridor from Clarksville, Qualicum North. Now, Qualicum Mayor spoke a lot about it. So the corridor is changing rapidly within the regional district at the thought of the regional district. So that Boundary Northfield is really the ICF and the standards for that type of train crossing is what's jacking up the cost on that one. Because it has to be built to be designed so that trains are going through it. And that's like, lots of trains every day, and that's just not happening. So, but now back to the Port Theatre. We have not taxed anyone in the amount of about $380,000. So I thought it was 4.2 million or 4.6 below in there. So we have not taxed this year and put $300,000 in to cover the carrying charges in case the Port Theatre goes through. Where did that come from then before?
I did raise that as an option last time.
How do you get those options out of my mind? Okay, that's okay. That's fine. I'm fine with that. I still like Jerry. I sort of understand. Thanks.
So do we have a motion? Or is there any more discussion?
I made the motion.
No. We have nothing on the floor right now.
I'll make a motion to receive for information the December 31st report dated April 12th.
Seconded there, so moved and seconded there. Any discussion? Bill?
Before we move on, I just wanted to say on this Port Theatre issue, I think Jerry, when he talks about borrowing, he contemplates a tax increase to accomplish what we need to accomplish. I've always believed this is a perfect opportunity for a legacy fund or a strategic infrastructure fund. So we could borrow the 4.2 or whatever our commitment ultimately ends up being, and to be paid back or to be paid down using money from the strategic infrastructure fund. That's exactly the fund that's exactly the purpose that I thought of that fund. So if you did it over 5 years, you'd end up at $920,000 a year for 5 years out of that fund. And it is a capital project, which is exactly what the fund's intended for, with no impact on taxes.
Mr. Redmond?
So the Strategic Infrastructure Fund, as staff, we don't even make a recommendation to fund anything from it. We're pretty careful because we've left that to council to decide. So we will welcome that, I think, as direction, and we can make that change on our financial plan if that's the wish of council. Because we set it up really for those projects, the strategic legacy projects.
So I just wanted to say they've been pretty quiet, Mr. Chair. They've been pretty quiet of late, but I take it that Mr. Halliday is extremely ill, and they have hired a replacement for him. And so I would suggest that that fundraising project, as he was spearheading it, is probably behind schedule. So we just need to let them sort through their things. I understand that the new person will be coming soon.
I recall in this room when our society did come to us and say, we haven't been successful after a year or so of trying to secure the necessary money to, and they were very upfront and forthright with that, which was really good of them to do that. And it was put on hold, in my opinion, at that time, because they really weren't active or feeling as though that they needed to let us know that they weren't having success in grant fundings and various fundraising initiatives. So it seems like it's quite a holding pattern and compounded by Bruce's help. So we do have a motion, and it is seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll go down to D on page 2. 2. And that would be to provide the committee information regarding the allocation of 2016 operating surplus, and the report is on page 25 to 28. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report provides you with staff recommendation of how to dispose of the results or the surpluses or the deficits for both the general fund, the sewer and water funds. We need to do this so we can finalize the audit, so we can post the entries so that the financial statements are done. So we've provided you with the levels of surpluses and recommendations on our recommendation, and some explanations on those recommendations on pages 26 to 27. Thank you.
I apologize, but I don't see the specific. I see explanations of where the surpluses are allocated from or to. But is it the options? Are those the recommend? Is that what you're making reference to as
No,
recommendation?
our recommendation is on page 25.
The Finance and Audit Committee recommend the council approve the allocation of 2016 operating surplus as well.
Yes.
That's in the first box.
Okay, thank you. I apologize.
I'll make that motion like discuss.
Seconded by Jerry. Moved by Jim. Seconded by Jerry. Conversation, discussion. And then Jerry.
Okay, staff always allocates to where they believe they should go, and I understand. We always have this thing with surplus, and I'm glad we have surplus. I think staff does a good job on this. Can you go back to the figures? I think you need to add an extra column, because the average guy would look at that and go, that doesn't add up right. It's just, I know it's the bottom numbers. If you look at those, how they add up. 5, 6, 64, but it looks like the whole column. So fire another column in there for me. It makes you don't have to worry about everything that doesn't add up right.
Doesn't add up.
No, so if you put 1.378 over it, mathematics 64, that's the total.
Mathematics genius in school, but it's just easier for me. That's why I'm sorry. You guys all understand it. It's easier. I wanted out what they can't add, and then I realized where I added it wrong. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll make that change.
Jerry.
Thank you. Just some questions with regards to this water fund. The year before, we were short money because of the drought. We said, save water. So now we have a surplus. Is that because people are using more water? Is that pretty much the way it reads to me?
Not necessarily, because the number of things go through happen for a surplus or deficit to happen, right? And water conservation is part of it. Part of it is spending on your operations, right? And so from the report, I'll let him speak instead of
Go ahead.
okay. That's right.
I could get right through actually.
Yeah.
Sure.
Due to the water treatment plant, it's impacting the level of servicing that we have to do is actually decreased. Part of the pipelines we're doing, so we're actually looking at how we can maximize on that savings right now, so that may reflect in the finances.
Okay. Yeah, because the main one was user fees related to water were higher than anticipated by $551,000. So what does that mean? That's the question I have. User fees related to water use were higher than anticipated. So does that mean they're using more water?
Yeah.
But shouldn't get more
No,
money?
not necessarily. So
Okay.
it's either, I'll let staff speak to this, but so when we have a user fee budget, and you say we're going to collect $10, right? We're not making an assumption on the number of connections and usage and stuff like that. And so over the year, you get new connections. Obviously, now you get more revenue coming through. That should, to some extent, correlate to the cost of providing that. But as you say, your costs are coming down because of the efficiencies coming out of the new plant.
Can I fix this?
Yeah.
Gardens were dry. No rainfall. People watered more. They were keeping their gardens greener. They stopped their lawns, but then the gardens and trees, fruit trees were getting watered because there was drought. So people actually used more water in their gardens. I think that's my explanation about that bumps up the user fee.
That's what I mean. So if that's the question, I would love a comparison because we talked about this. I'd like to know what last year was compared to this year, like, or because water conservation is always a huge thing. I think that's one of the most important things that we hear about, especially when summer comes around. So to get this report now to let people know about anticipated summer, I'd like to know how much water, because we meter our water, so we know how much water we use. I'd like to know how much water we used this year compared to last year, what we made or lost last year compared to this year, well, 2015, 2016. So I would like to know those numbers. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I understand on if we're losing money, because we're losing money just strictly on water usage, this means that people are using less water, which is great. It's like the dump. It's great. It depends on how you look at it. We're conserving water. It's great. We're losing money. It sucks. But if people are, if we're making money, that means we're using too much water. I don't know if that's great for us to make money, but it sucks that we're using water. So that's where I like to figure out, because it's not really clear, and especially when the public is getting back to the public meeting.
So, Mr. Chair, so I think it's a good conversation. I think the right spot for that report and discussion would probably be the Public Works Committee. So you would have through Mr. CEO and Bill make the report to that group. What you're seeing here is really the tail end of this whole process.
Through the chair, given the structure and nature of the terms referenced to the Public Works and Engineering Committee, any topics are supposed to come from council. It's supposed to be top down, not bottom up. So if council wishes us to prepare that report to take to the Public Works and Engineering Committee, I'll need a motion to move that motion.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Before we get to the motion, Jim wanted to speak.
Well, that's actually, in our water system, the water audit we have goes through Public Works, and it talks about 10% leakage. If we're putting out, megaliters, thousands of megaliters of water, 10% is a lot of water lost. And our pipes are pinholed, or what size pipes, we use it all into our own infrastructure costs. And I believe that the water audit needs to do. I don't know, we get a water out 2013 in Kerwood, Liddell, and we have all of our usage up to that point. But it's like we should take that database and continue to add the figures every year and update it. But we kind of go that, and then we go to the project implementation. So I'd love to see our water audit and get those facts and figures. They do have that in there from 2013, 10-year identification of most of our water stuff. So that is important to me, because 10% leakage to me is it acceptable? At some standards it's acceptable. It's a lot of water across that system. And for conservation, that's our biggest asset. Water. That's the biggest thing.
So just going back to the potential motion, from a procedurally, can this Finance and Audit Committee make a motion to recommend to council, then back down to
Or you could wait and do that in council.
So how would you propose we follow a process to get to that motion?
So that it's not lost. The Finance and Audit Committee recommends to council that council directs the Public Works Committee to provide a report on the water audit. And then that way it's not lost, so it's in the system.
Just following the follow process.
Thank you.
So I'm in that motion.
Moved by Jerry, seconded by Jim. I just want to make sure that the gals have what the intent is.
Well, they're way ahead of us.
Good.
Way ahead of us.
Any discussion on the motion? No.
Oh, no.
Okay, no discussion on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're still on subject matter, however, of the surplus allocation. So, Bill and then Jerry.
So, on is this the place to talk about this unallocated general surplus and the application of some of that to the additional cost for snow and road upgrades due to the harsh winter weather?
We can talk about it at this point, but if you realize what has happened, if you go to page 26, we actually have rationale as to why we would like to deal with that surplus value.
Got it.
Okay.
And there's over $5 million in that general surplus account now.
That's correct.
Right.
And so
So I
ask you question again. Question remains: is any of this surplus, general surplus of $5+ million, available to be allocated?
Yeah, we can talk about this in the next report.
Okay.
That's why.
I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that okay?
Sure. The next one I wanted to ask was on the water fund. It seems we've had increased revenues and whatnot. Was there not some front end loading, 5-year front end loading on capital cost repayment or capital debt repayment with respect to the water treatment plant that we could consider paying down?
MFA doesn't work that way.
I thought we had some short-term and long-term though. I thought we borrowed from ourselves, from some of our reserves at one point. Mistaken?
We did for this building, and that might be what you're remembering.
Okay.
Not for the water treatment.
Okay, thanks.
I think was it Jim or Jerry that was up next?
Okay.
I was wondering, have we made the motion to receive this information?
We haven't.
Doing the recommendation.
It's been moved to second.
We haven't voted. I just have, if nobody else has a question, I just have a question. The general fund, it's on page 26. The general fund, in the general fund surplus was $1.378 million, which represents 1% of the budget. So is 1.37 now the number that is 1%? Because, I'm sorry?
It's general fund budget.
Well, is 1.37 now the number that represents a 1% tax increase? If that's the number that we're using, is that the number? Because it used to be considerably less. 1% used to be 720, so like 760, 850.
So what you're looking at here, the 1,378, that's the total budget, and of course the funding for that budget comes from property taxes and user fees. So 1% property tax increase is still just a little bit below $1 million. That was over the entire budget. Yes.
Okay. So because we're just speaking about. Why is that again?
So go over it one more time. So our total operating budget is $138 million. That's expenditures. So of that operating budget, we have $100 million from property, or just under $100 million from property taxes plus user fees. So that percentage is on the operating expenditures. The 1% is on revenues, and only revenues from property taxes. And that's probably have to draw it out to really make it explain it.
So did you say on revenue from property taxes, which is, you said 100 million, but other user fees to make up that is 37+ million.
Yeah.
So if it's only on property taxes, then would it be 1.378 or would it?
So let's back off a bit and simplify. What she's saying is, we do talk of the 1% equivalent for property tax, which is about $985 million for property tax. This is 1% of the general fund budget. The general fund budget is made up of property tax and user fees, which is more than the 100 million, which is the 138 million. So 1% of that 138 is 1.3 million. So these are two different pieces.
So if we increase taxes by 1%, how much money do we need?
It's $1 million.
It's $1 million, not 1.3, not 1. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Sure.
Just on this, that's an offshoot, but this is the ops tax fees, 1.3%. What's 1% of the capital? The capital budget.
Varies year to year.
Well, last year,
It's usually around about $50 million.
Yeah.
It can vary between 30 and 50.
yeah, last year was 53 million.
Yeah, and it varies.
So 535, 1%.
Yeah, but don't forget, with projects, we mainly fund it from reserves.
Yeah. And some DCC reserves, DCC. Thank you.
Call the question. In favor? Opposed? E6. And then I'm not and the purpose is to present the committee with a summary of the operating results for the projects ending December 31st, 2016. The report is on pages 29 to 33. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an information report of NETC. Just for information, NETC is a separate board, and we committed beginning last year that we provide this as information to council. But there is a surplus number there of 65, and really it's because in Q4 of 2016 there wasn't much going on with NETC. It's not like there was any major activity going on. So, thank you.
Any questions?
No. Thank you. So now with the core review and the direction where NSC has gone, I know we won't today, but I think sooner or later we're going to have a conversation how we want this. I know we've been passed the mayor to oversee academic components through the city, but I want to see how we're going to govern and get some action and priorities around that. I know we're going to swamp with a million things, but I think this can be key. And there's lots of nonsense out there around, like we don't care about academic, we don't care about tourism, blah, blah, blah. So I look forward to that conversation and get something positive happening. I know we have Amber, I think she's in-house. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we can do some good stuff and with all the top-heavy stuff. So I look forward to that conversation and get that priorities rolling. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know off topic, but I just want to put that out there. That's fine. Yeah.
Through the chair, there is a workshop scheduled, and I would encourage all of you to participate, where we will talk about options, and after that, you will provide you with a report as to how to proceed. So I think it's been scheduled already. It should be on your calendars already.
Cool.
If not, it's coming.
It is on my calendar.
Yes. Okay.
What? Sorry. When is that? Does anybody know?
Yeah.
Maybe we can come back for today.
It's on the 18th. Mr. Cooper is respect to me.
So Tuesday next week.
Tuesday next week.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or discussion?
Somebody else?
Would somebody please move by Billy Oakham, seconded by Ian. Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Next subject matter is the conference center operating results on page 34 to 37, and Mr. Mello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is also one of those reports that we provide to you as information, and this shows a surplus of about $177,000 in 2016. And the big question that people always ask is, say, well, we're subsidizing this, what do you mean it's a surplus? That means we are subsidizing it at a lower rate than we had planned to. That's how this calculation is coming through. And so we're just providing this to you as information at this point.
So we forecasted approximately a $1.1 million deficit, and I came in at 900 and something. Right. Sure.
Thank you. I don't know if it's the same time, I won't talk much about it, but I wish we had this number before we negotiated the contract.
I'll talk to you offline. I know.
Thank you, because we were showing that number and now we're at this number.
So there is, if you look at that number, it looks good, but it's not that good. So I'll talk to you offline.
It looks good, but it's not good.
Good.
Good from far from good. Okay. Would somebody like to make the motion to receive purchase? Moved by Jim, seconded by Barry. Any more discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay.
That was a great quote, though. It looks good, but it's not that good.
And she was technically.
Sarah, do you have that?
Tamara had her headlight closed.
It looks good, but it's not that good.
She had her face closed.
The financial plan update, 2017-2021, and then there's a second piece added by Bill, an alternate.
I think
So if I could just turn that over to Mr. Member and then we'll proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is one report that all of you were itching to get to, so we're here now. Just for context, and then I'll say a few things just to contextualize where we're coming from. At the end of December, we had a provisional budget approved that assumed a 1.5% property tax increase. And we are now coming forward with a recommendation for a finalization of the budget so we can set the property tax rates ahead of the deadline of May 15. A number of things have happened since then that have provided cost pressures of about 0.8 property tax increase equivalent, as we have outlined in the report. Before we get there, I just wanted to highlight a few things that Ms. Duncan actually outlined in this report here as context. Last week we talked to you about continuing the 1% asset management piece, so we've incorporated that number past 2017 to 2022. We also on page 39. As staff, what happens as this is still fresh in everybody's minds when we talked about the event center. When we go borrow from MFA, we borrow on the long-term piece, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But the way it works, at every 10 years, there is a reset of the interest rate. And we just had a reset for the Port of Nanaimo Center. And because we're in a low interest rate scenario, there was a reduction in our debt payment for about $637,000 for the next 10 years, or whatever the term that's left. So on page 39, what staff is asking you to do is to say, we know interest rates are going to go up at some point. As much as the Bank of Canada just said they're going to keep it at 0.25% this morning, they're going to go up in a year or so. So what we are proposing to do is, going forward, we set up a debt stabilization reserve, and there's a number of things we would put in there. One, when we get to a reset, like we just had, we would put that money that we would have collected property tax-wise going forward into that fund, so that at the next reset, if there is a rate increase, we don't have to go out and tax again. We simply can use money out of that reserve to the extent that's available, so that we can smoothen the property tax. And in addition to that, we have payoffs that are coming up, 2021, 2026, 27. What we are hoping we could do as a strategy is, when those debts get paid off, the money that we would have been collecting going forward, we would continue collecting that, but we'll put that in a debt stabilization reserve, so that at any point when you decide that you want to go and borrow, the amount that you borrow becomes less, because you are actually now putting money aside. Instead of borrowing, you are actually putting money aside for that. Even if you went to borrow and you decide you're going to borrow, there's no tax increase, you can always pick from this fund for your debt. So that's one aspect that we're talking about. And if you're looking for a number, the seed money for this would be $637,000 in 2017. I've sent you an email to explain the impact on the budget based on the winter for road repairs and for snow and ice control, and I think we'll have a fulsome discussion on that. The strategic infrastructure reserve that we set up in December, I think we all know what it is, but I wanted to correct some misinformation that's going out there in the public that says, well, you said we had $5.4 million. So if we have that $5.4 million, why are you asking for a property tax increase? So if you go back to the $5.4 million, there were several sources of funding that we had identified. We had identified the appeals. We had identified some gas tax. We had identified a hotel tax. We identified the strategic infrastructure reserve. We identified some reassignment of general infrastructure. So those are by nature capital sources of funding, and that's number one. Number two, the strategic infrastructure reserve does not have $5.4 million sitting there waiting. If you remember, we were going to ramp this over time. I think it's 3 or 4 years. It's probably until 2019, 2020 when it would have that $3 million a year going forward. So I don't have a stash of money sitting out there and waiting for this. So I wanted to clear that up. I've seen people say, well, we deserve a 5.4% tax increase. That's not how it works. What we're talking about with the event center, we're talking about an asset. We're talking about capital sources of funding. What we're talking about today, we're talking about recurring, recurring expenditures or some one-time stuff that we need to do to fix our roads and respond to snow and ice. So having said that, we have made one assumption though around the strategic infrastructure reserve. In the operating budget, we continue taxing about $600,000 a year for property acquisitions. So we are proposing that we redirect that to come out of the strategic infrastructure reserve going forward. And I think His Worship also had another suggestion to deal with the port. And so those would be examples of what we do. So having said that, I just wanted to lay that and bring you back to the 1.5% versus the 2.3% as a point of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have Bill first.
So, two things. One is we're trying to figure out how to deal with an extraordinary winter. I would just like to put a motion on the floor that we take whatever this shortfall is out of general unallocated reserves. Will that work?
I have another idea.
Can we just, so let's just stay on the question. And so the question is, can we take the money out of unallocated reserves or out of one? Can I just, Bill, are you on a one-time basis? Like, is it on a one-time basis, if the amount is 1.3 or whatever is necessary, to come out of the 5 point whatever surplus?
Right. We have more money. We had more money allocated towards snow removal this year than ever. We had two things that happened. One, we had significant increase in the requirement for snow removal. Plus, we had significant damage to roadways that we need to deal with. So it's an extraordinary event. And I'd just like to put the motion forward that we take it from the general unallocated reserves.
I think it's an option, but it's not. I think it's not sustainable for a number of reasons I'll try and explain. So what you have in front of you is an ongoing expense. That's number one. Number two, we have to deal with reserves, minimum, maximums, as a separate thing that we are coming back to deal with you. So if I think we could park that conversation of using that reserve until we have this new reserve policy for us to work with. But we still have to deal with what we do this year. And so I'll let you guys continue the discussion, but and keep that as an option.
So, Jerry.
Thanks. Well, a couple actually questions first before we get to that discussion. This new debt stabilization reserve, what we found out is that the waste treatment plant's going to cost us $82 million. Even though it's already at function, can this reserve be used in case, because that's going to come up in 10 years, we know that the rate's going to go up. So the money that we have in this reserve, can we allocate that to pay for the waste treatment increases in the next 10 years, if that comes up, even though it comes up in RDF, it's a requisition from us. Can we use this reserve to pay for our RDF functions, our share of the RDF functions on debt? Question.
I think that's possible. I think that's something we need to kick around a little bit.
Because it's $82 million. It's a huge, it's not a small amount. So that's my biggest concern for that one, with regards to that. And I see that we have $637,000 right now as a surplus. So instead of talking about taking money out of reserves, why can't we just use this money and pay snow, pay the $637 that started in 2018? Because this is not a reserve technically yet. This is surplus money that hasn't. We're not going to pull it from reserve. It's free money. Well, it's not free money. It's money that hasn't been allocated. And if you're asking us to allocate in 2017, why can't we start this reserve in 2018 and just dump that $637,000 into paying the snow removal? I guess is that an option?
Did you want to respond to that, Victor, or do you want to go through the table first?
I'm going to think this one through. I thought he had his hand up.
Jim does. He has his hand, but I wanted to give you the opportunity.
I think it's an option, and I'm thinking it through. Okay. I'll come back to you.
Jim?
Okay, yeah, where we get the money from, if you take it out of that fund, it still somewhere came from taxation, and it reduces the load on the people at that time. So we'd have to collect less off of them if we subsidize it by reserves. That's one of the reasons why we build reserves, is to limit. We see something coming, build reserves, limit the taxes there. So we overtax now a little bit for this 20-year plan. So when I see our percentages go across here, asset management's a huge thing. That's a 20-year plan or more, or a 40-year plan. And remember, there's 270 if I calculate over 10 years missing, right, or shortfall. So we have to make that up. The snow removal is an interesting issue. Across the world, where the Canadians, the Great White North, big, tough snow people and everything, everybody here expects every piece of ice removed from every piece of the community. It's just like, I saw an article last night on TV of Ottawa and all these places. Ottawa has an unbelievable thing going on right now where they're killing their streams. They're killing a lot of the lakes where they're dumping their snow because they remove all the snow. There's literally a 70-foot bank of snow in Ottawa right now. And all the salt they use to clean the roads for everybody is killing the waterways. And how much salt and crap do we put down here in this big snowfall, and it costs us hundreds of thousands, and we don't even think of what the downstream damage is, where we push snow, where we dump snow. And to me, get a pair of boots. Don't drive your two-wheel drive car with shitty tires. And if you can't afford a car, then when our buses should be running, we don't even clean the bus shelters off. We plow snow into them. We don't want people on the roads because it's dangerous. We want them in the transit, and we plow snow onto the buses, right to the bus shelters. I got pictures. Really? Oh, yes. I mean, it's... And so for me, this whole snow removal thing was just turned into another deflection. Another big deflection by a group of people. And to me, global warming's coming. Drought, snowfall, rainstorm the other day. Beauty. So this is to argue over it. We got to pay it. It's part of our operations. It's part of what we do. And maybe we've got to limit sometimes how much we do. Clean the roads that need to go to the hospital, fire departments, police departments. And if you have to get locked at home for a day, you maybe have a 311 number you can call if you can't get out and somebody helps you. So, yeah, it's just part of the budget. Take it out of some. If we take it out of reserves and we take some up down the road, this year's cost made up from next year or whatever. And that's why I say shifting. It's just about shifting money around. If it's something you want to do, snow removal, then get it done. Pay for it.
So if I could just go back to what I understood to be the fundamental ask is that our increase was forecast at 1.5%. As a result of our extreme weather and winter conditions and our snow removal and now our road conditions, it's going to go up 0.8% or approximately to 2.3 or 2.2%. Is that close? And that number would be represented by about $800,000 plus or minus. We have a surplus in our operating $5.1 million. So I think the ask is, could we take from the surplus, keep our budget at 1.5, but take the money that we've already banked and put toward road repairs without impacting our budget to 2.3% because we're hearing considerable amount of push or feedback on our road conditions coming out of the winter. So for me, it seems just simply seems to make sense. I have a driveway that needs fixed. I hope I have enough money set aside somewhere that I might have to not buy my new couch, my new flat screen, because I need to fix my road to get to my house instead. Or as well as because I saved some money, more money than I thought I was going to need to buy my flat screen. I can still do both without hurting anything. So that, I mean, that's what I'm hearing, and I don't have any reason right now not to support that. We have $5 million sitting there. We have extreme condition. Let's fix what we need to fix with those surplus money. That's just my just my comment. Sure.
Thank you. I would also like to not shift money. I'd like to see what the public works can do to find this money to fix roads. Like, I don't want to give them the extra 200 something to fix the road. I just say that include that in their budget, and they figure out where to get the $288,000 from public works. So we're not shifting money from reserves. Tighten their belt. Because that's what I would like to see. If this is just an added item, let's see what they can do with your. I get why we have to do snow, and I'm not gonna. There's no other answer. If this is a past, it's used. It's happened. But let's take that 288 right out of or include it into their budget and say, fix these roads. Figure out where to get the $280,000 savings from all the project overruns or the surplus. We always seem to have surplus in these projects we're doing, unless big miscalculation in the soil. But the other projects we've seen are coming under budget or on budget. So can't they do that in their own department, Public Works?
Question. So I think there's a middle of the road piece to happen here, and I'm going to try and marry the two. And he raises a very good point about what we need to think about is whether you want to pay now or you want to pay later. That's something we always need to keep intact. We can solve this today. It's going to show its ugly head down the road because that's how this thing works. So we have committed to come back to you with the reserve policy and levels and stuff like that. We are proposing a new reserve, which is the debt one. So I could say we used that in 2017. When we come back in May, I think we will talk of the bigger strategy with that stabilization thing also at the table. We leave the 5.1 intact for now. And then we can revisit that conversation when we have all the reserves in one place. Because right now you only see one reserve, so you probably want to see all of them in one place. So we deal with that part. The road rehab piece, I think we could approach it this way. We could say to Mr. Chief Operating Officer, well, find this money in your budget, if that's what we want to do. But also be realistic that we might, at some point, because we are beginning to manage our budgets more stringently on a quarterly basis, we will definitely probably come back to you in short order to say that's possible or not possible. At that point, this $200,000 probably we could go into that reserve, but we would have talked about reserves and have a better picture of what our reserves should look like. So if you're looking for a motion, probably for direction to staff at this point is to say, hold off, redirect the 637 for snow and ice, do some work on your budget in terms of the road rehab, with obviously the option that you can always come back and make your case if you need to, At that point, I think we can advise as to where that funds are going to come from, so that we can provide Ms. Duncan with specific directions so she has to finalize the rate. So we leave the rate at 1.5 with that as a strategy. When we talk about the reserves, we can now talk about the long-term impact of some of these things, if that's.
I think that motion. Is that a motion, or we just keep discussing, or keep discussing?
Maybe before we make the motion, just I have Bill Yocum, I have Gord, and then I have Bill Kay. So maybe before we make the motion, just keep it on the side of your desk there. So Bill Yocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Victor, I like those words. We're talking just under 300K this year, and I know probably we need a longer conversation on this. For example, just from what I do limited knowledge, I know that, for example, that a 1 meter blade is 2 meter blade would save lots of money. Well, that's another conversation. So there's ways to find the money within the system, in terms of what Jerry was sort of touching on. Because when you got a contractor that only paid with 2 meter blade, we're doing a lot of unnecessary asphalt. But that's another expensive project. But nevertheless, also a final comment, I definitely support what you're saying, is people seem to forget this road here is when I first got into council, there were ridiculous numbers, like pushing 6%, 4%, 5%. So you guys are doing a great job. This is hard. You're going to grind it out a bit. You guys are doing awesome. Because when I first got into council, those numbers on the older team were 4, 5, 6%. So I just want to acknowledge, you guys are grinding up pretty good. It's really noticeable. So I want to thank you guys, because we'll get all of us collectively on this subject, get slammed around out there, but there's good work going on. So anyways, I give me support of the conversations we had from Mr. Mema and you guys. Thanks, Bill.
Gord, and then Bill.
I think part of the problem we're also finding with this one this year is, and I think this happens every year, we give the public a projected tax increase. They actually think that's what the tax increase is going to be, 1.5%. So when something comes up, they're not expecting it, and they freak out. So I think a lot of it's in the way we phrase it. I'm looking at the news release we put out. Due to the severe weather and IMO experience this past winter, projected property tax increases have increased from 1.5% to 2.3%.
Blame it on the snow.
Could increase, not have increased, because they didn't. They haven't increased. We're working on actually making them not increase, but that they could increase. I really think we have to be more clear with projected 1.5 tax increase subject to, as opposed to just a projected 1.5 tax increase. And it makes it more clear to the average person. You might not get the math, and might not be able to figure it out, and may not even know that we do have these reserves and other means that we can use to bring them. So I think that's part of it. I'll definitely support keeping it at 1.5. I think we can do it. I think our staff have given us a really good idea.
So this council and this administration told the community that we could borrow $80 million with no tax increase. We have a bad winter, we go over budget on snow removal, and we've got some broken up roads and pavement. And we're being told, and the community is now being told, that because of this minor little expense of a $180 million budget, that we're going to see a 0.8% tax increase. I just say find the money. We're being told all the time we've got over $100 million in reserves. Let's just do it. Surely, if we believe that there will be no tax increase with an $80 million borrowing, that there's got to be that we should be able to figure out where to get $800,000 from on a one time. And when we look at these significant events, we had a significant event in '96. We had a significant event, 2002, 3, something like that. They were significant events. They were out of the norm. They were extraordinary. Will we see more? Probably. So maybe we need to increase that budget. There's no doubt about it. But as it stands right now, to find $800,000 shouldn't be that big a deal without seeing a 0.8% tax increase. We instruct our staff what to do.
So if we instruct them to find the money, let's do it. Like, just do it.
Just before I get to you, Victor, I don't disagree with the comments, but I also, my only comment on that would be is I don't find a relation between the event center borrowing and what people's view is that we have $5 to $6 billion every year for just sitting there waiting for something to do. That was an entirely different strategy and borrowing and infrastructure and all those things that were warranted. This is operation. This is just a straight operational requirement because of an extreme one-off situation in the last decade or so. But fundamentally, I agree with what's been said without a motion. Yeah.
So thank you. I don't want to cloud conversations. We certainly get instructions from council, so we don't drive the bus. We drive the bus. I concede the comment that he makes that our messaging should have been crude. I think that's a very valid point. But at the same time, I would like you to accept that we would caution you not to set wrong expectations about the implications of your decision. That cannot stand, Your Worship, that we're going to fund $80 million. There was no tax increase. Well, there must be money somewhere. That's not correct. That cannot stand. So I concede that part. I would also hope that you also don't set wrong expectations for your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a comment before we go to a motion, because it was discussed about going to Public Works and say, we'll find the money. For me, that would probably mean pushing projects off that are in the queue now to 2018 or 2019. I'm just guessing, speculating, which I would like to see us not push projects that have been planned in 2016 or 15 or 17 off into another year because we have to find money. We've got the money. Let's put the money to use because we need to put the money to use now and it's an emergency, per se. I see Mr. Craig's come to the table, so I'll just let Brad speak and then Jim go ahead.
Through the chair, a couple of things. The budget, yes, was an extraordinary year. The way Public Works does the roads is priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. Priority 1 roads are the roads the hospital, the police, the main intersections, etc. Priority 2 roads are schools, etc. So priority 1 is in schools. Priority 2 are 2 different levels, and then priority 3. The conversation here comes down to level of service. And so if council wishes us to change our level of service, we can do that. The second piece, understanding, is that the roads took a significant this year. If anybody understands the way that hot patch works, you have to be to a certain temperature. Given that the weather situation right now, it's been colder than normal and wetter than normal for the month of March. We've not been able to get out. Plus, we're at the mercy of the plant that actually only opens up to start with the hot mix that has just recently opened up. So, again, with the budgets that we have right now, and thanks to Mr. Mellon and his team, making sure that we're a lot more accurate on our budgets from the Public Works team, we are fairly on line with our budgets. So if we're asked to find the money, my concern to this group is that either yes, we will have to push off some projects, which can be done with this level of service, or if we change our level of service in other areas. Keep in mind that as Mayor McKay mentioned, we have had a snow event once since I've lived on the island and been here for 20-some years. It's about once every 9 or 10 years. So this is seems to be a one-off. Keep in mind, I do respect Councillor Kipp's comments of the global warming piece does do the short-term shocks quite a bit, so we may see an increase in these types of events, to which council may want to consider how much money we do have sitting in the reserves for the snow budget and the roads budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the update. And I know that Bill has to leave to go to another meeting, so do we want to get a motion on the floor so that we can address a motion versus more conversation?
I'll make a motion that we divert this $637,000 from the Vancouver Island Conference Center debt servicing expenditures to cover the snow removal and increase back to reserves, which I think is $593,000 roughly, and then that $288,000 for road repair to be found in the public works budget. Keep it at 3.5%.
So you wish to take the $637,000, which starts in 2017 for BICC, which is not all in 1 year of 2017, is that correct? It's a 10-year because of the.
No. It's 37 for each year.
So has been, because we refinanced?
Yeah.
So we have a $637,000 savings. My only comment on that, well, I shouldn't tell this a seconder, so. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, discuss it,
For discussion.
and I'd like to speak on it. Okay. I don't believe we should tag staff with the individual item to find and where to find it. I think we should tag staff to find us the money the best they can. With an example like that, moving some of those forward makes it easier for me. What we do have to explain to the public is there's more costs. This year has what is called hydrostatic lift. Freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing, freezing, thawing. So the grounds get lifted because the freezing and going down. So that rips up the roads even more. So this year, this was not an extreme year of snowfall. No houses collapsed, no people died. It wasn't a lot of heart attacks from shoveling. It's just a number of snow events. But for me, it's just part of it. The citizens have to understand that we're at the cost of doing business here. As you've heard from staff, they'd love for us to task them to do this, to work with garbage or more garbage in the parks or getting on to more things. But there's a cost attached. And the public has to realize this is a cost. It's not, we're not mismanaging. It came in as a thing that took a long time. And can we improve how we did it? Can we talk better to the school district, to the regional district, to make a more concerted effort? Well, how can we improve these things? Can we get bigger plows? Can we just say to people, we're plowing the hospital road, and that's what we do, and the roads we mentioned are primary roads. So for me, I don't think we should task specifically in line items in here. That's their job. We say we want this money out of a reserve somewhere and get it done, no tax increase based on that. So that's for me. So I would probably vote against the specifics of this motion.
Thank you. I got Gordon. And then Bill.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I would vote against the specifics of the motion because if we do take it out of the public works, then who knows? Shit happens. And they're increased by $500,000, which anything can happen. We could have a minor earthquake that ruins our ancient road list. So by doing it that way, I think that I like Jim's idea. Make a motion to get it done with the potential of using debt stabilization reserve and other funds.
There is a motion on the floor, Bill. You're next.
Thank you guys quickly. Maybe Jerry can maybe he'll make just a minor amendment to the wording because I would like to simply is just direct staff to keep the tax at 1.5, and I don't get into those nuances because I know there's various ways, and you guys have come with the best suggestion. I know you guys have said some. And secondly, I'm glad that some of us days I have to be at work too, but I don't report to us for the people in Nanaimo. So that's another separate comment. Anyways,
Well, don't anybody leave to the washroom. We'll lose our forum. So what I'm sensing then is a desire to withdraw this motion and deliver a new motion that is cleaner than take 637 or 280 from there and drop this and do that.
It's going to come before open council anyway.
But it has to come from this committee, so we can't just blow it off and say, well, it has to. So you either withdraw your motion in the second
Yes.
there with it, and then
I'll make a new motion. That,
withdraw.
I'll
So
withdraw.
we need a motion to withdraw the motion. And
No, we don't
we don't need a motion to
withdraw. Just withdraw.
Yep. So then
now we're back to a place where if you want to clean after the discussion to clean up the motion that's been withdrawn.
So the motion now is to be maintain a 1.5% tax increase for 2017. Or decrease. Well,
So,
so
that does not address.
that's what you're saying is let the staff find the money, and that's maintain it.
So from my perspective, that does not address the requirement for road repair. It just says keep it at 1.5. It doesn't say anything about repairing roads or sidewalks.
That's the reason why it was increased. They already said, so obviously staff are gonna assume that because of the 0.8% increase from snow and the road work, that's why we've increased it. Otherwise, maybe at 1.5%, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So
You and I know that.
Yeah.
The motion doesn't, to me, that's not what the motion says. So the motion just says keep it at 1.5%.
Through the chair, I think Councillor Yocum actually had between the motion that you're looking for, which basically says staff maintain property tax increase at 1.5 and address snow and ice and road rehab through what did you say? I can't remember what you say.
I said something like direct staff to maintain the tax for 20 this year at 1.5.
I think you said the reserve funds through the.
Yes.
Okay.
And maintain the roads with surplus or reserves.
Okay.
I think there was something in there. Because if we don't say that, we're not saying,
The work should be done.
in my mind, we're not.
Councillor Hong, do you agree with that amendment?
yeah, that's the same message.
Can somebody read that back then, please?
That council direct staff to maintain the 1.5% tax increase for 2017 and address the road maintenance through the various reserves. No.
Okay, well, for me, it's,
Okay.
Well, it was through delaying the debt stabilization, the beginning of the debt
It was-
stabilization.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's
it by 1 year.
Okay.
And so that we're very clear that's only for 2017.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to schedule that motion.
And the road rehab through reserves. That's it.
so moved by Councillor Yocum, or Bill Yocum, seconded by Joe. And to maintain the 1.5% private tax increase for 2017 and complete road rehabilitation. But we're not putting we're not putting an amount on that, just complete the road rehabilitation from reserves.
Perfect. Plain, simple. Gets done.
Yeah.
Public Works could pick projects they think can be put off. That's part of it. This came up. And some project down the road is it's getting superseded. Poof, there goes. When my roof leaks, the porch don't get fixed until the roof gets in and moves the projects. And that's what they're good at, moving shells around and
That's what I was trying to
moving
get
things
at.
around. They can do that. And somebody else might suffer out there. Some road might not get paved. Thank you. Call the question.
Well, there's some conversation, and you know, we have a motion to be funded from reserves. Do we want to change or amend the motion now to be from reserves and/or a combination of Public Works deferring projects out to 2018? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think you're now trying to do staff's work.
I agree.
So let's step back. The motion, I think as it sits, is clean enough. I think like I said, we don't have to set unrealistic expectations and say, go find the money, move the projects, whatever it is. There's an acceptance that there's road work to be done. The CEO, myself, and our staff will do that. All I asked for was we delay as we have agreed the debt stabilization reserve by a year the difference we'll find from reserves to do the oil rehab. And then that's clean. We'll come back to you with the reserve policy and the implications. I think we've sounded our warning bells in terms of whether you want to pay now or you want to pay later. We'll deal with that in May.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, carried, thank you.
Motion
Just before we do that, just like that, there is a question period as well. When is our next meeting scheduled for?
Our next meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday. Now, this is, remember what we said to these committees. We said you two guys have your busy season and then it tails off. This is your busy season. So next Wednesday, we will come back with the property tax file, or you will receive a report from KPMG on the financial statements. You'll receive the financial plan, amendment bylaw, so we can meet our deadlines.
So April 20th, is it morning, 9:30?
It's 19th at 9:30.
Or 19th, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
19th at 9:30, okay, thanks. Sure.
What about the downtown, the DMVA
Oh,
money?
it's coming next week.
Next week as well, perfect.
Any questions?
I have one comment. Thank you for the 5 for sticking me through the meeting. I noticed all the others left, so thank you.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yes.
But it's not question period.
I got a question, Council. I should have brought this on the capital piece. Just because it's new direction, or hopefully new direction going down towards the waterfront here. You guys probably answered this in a way at times. What do we do about the bridge, trestle, roadway? Because I'd still like to see some movement, action going on. You can't leave the lands as is. You know, the bridge and the roadway that, you know, we still got to do stuff down there.
The project is alive, so we are still doing the option designs and stuff, so it should be with council at some point soon.
Cool. So I needed to know for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Jerry, Jim, favor? All those in favor, say